The bronze bells of Pentos were still tolling for the last light, when Viserys Targaryen stood alone at the balustrade of Illyrio Mopatis's roof garden, his pale hair shaken by a sea breeze scented with spice and distant storm. He had rehearsed this moment since boyhood, imagining the shouts of adoration, the kneeled throngs, the banners of the dragon flying once more over tall walls. But the vista before him was only a merchant city, gaudy and soft, soaked in perfumed intellect. Yet beneath its idle shimmer he sensed currents ready to turn. In his palm rested 3 eggs, onyx green flecked with copper, creamy white laced with gold, midnight blue streaked violet, alive with a heat too constant to be mistaken for sunlight. They had been meant as bridal gifts for his little sister, but Daenerys was gone now, taken by a death in the red wastes and buried beneath coarse sand that would never know rain. Grief had seared him raw, yet in its furnace a new vision had hardened. The dragon fire of old Valyria, reborn not through his sister, but through him. He closed his fingers around the largest egg, feeling its shell thrum, and wondered if Targaryen blood alone were enough to wake what slept within. The maesters claimed dragons were gone from the world, their last spark smothered in the smoke of Summerhall. But maesters had never believed in Viserys. He had learned that much from their soft smiles when they called him the Beggar King. No, he would not beg. He would command as Aegon had commanded, and the world would learn to bow or burn. Still, command required more than brittle pride. It required a stage upon which destiny could unfurl. Pentos was too small, too safe. Across the Jade Sea, beyond the spice routes and ruined Valyrian roads, lay Slaver's Bay, its cities fat with coin and cruelty. Meereen, the greatest of them, rose at the mouth of the Skahazadhan like a gilded serpent coiled behind pyramids. Meereen was not a city accustomed to fear, but dragons could teach any city the taste of fear. Viserys turned from the parapet, his cloak catching on a marble griffin. The banquet below echoed with harp strings and Illyria's booming laughter, yet he walked unseen between pillars veined with purple quartz, his boots silent on mosaic floors showing the doom. In Illyria's private library, scrolls lay strewn, histories of Valyria, accounts of dragon lore, half-burnt recipes for unguent oil said to rouse scale and bone. He had devoured every word. Tonight, he would do more than read. Tonight, he would dare. He knelt before a bronze brazier shaped like Balerion, tipped a vial of spiced resin onto coals, and let flame blossom in tongues of emerald. The eggs he placed carefully within the brazier's maw. Heat roared up, fierce enough to blister skin, and for a moment he almost withdrew. But the memory of Daenerys' grave windswept and empty steadied him. He pressed his hands to the scorching shell, desperate and resolute. At first, there was nothing. Only the hiss of oils and the whine of hot metal. Then from deep inside the green egg came a crack, small but sure, like ice thawing on a winter lake. Viserys' breath caught. Aesir spidered across the shell, incandescent at its edges. Light bled through, radiant, blinding, and the library filled with a sound older than speech. A keening shriek born of fire and hunger. Flame burst upward as the shell fell away, and a creature of talons and smoke unfurled tiny wings inside the brazier, eyes glowing molten gold. A second crack echoed, then a third. Moments later, 3 hatchlings clambered across the coals, scales gleaming wetly in the firelight. Green and copper, pearl and gold, midnight and violet, each no larger than a cat, yet already savage in their beauty. Viserys wept without shame. "My children," he whispered, and they turned their narrow skulls toward him, as though recognizing the cadence of blood. When he offered his wrist, the green one latched on, teeth pricking flesh, and the pain sang through him like prophecy, a bond forged in crimson and flame. The hatchling drank but a drop before releasing, wings flaring. In that instant, Viserys felt larger than the room, larger than the palace. Every breath of the dragons was his own, every flicker of their thoughts a spark in his mind. He named them Vaesophor, Oryx, and Tenebrix, ancient High Valyrian words for conquer, dawn, and shadow. Names suited to the empire he would carve. Illyrio burst in then, face slick with sweat, rings flashing. The Magister's gaze darted from the shattered brazier to Viserys' bleeding wrist to the hatchlings perched on his shoulders. Fear wrestled greed in his eyes, but greed triumphed. Magnificent, Illyrio crooned. A miracle of blood and fire. The free cities will pay fortunes merely to behold them. With such beasts, Westeros can wait. Viserys cut in, voice steady as steel cooling in water. First, I require a kingdom of my own. Ships, soldiers, provisions. You will arrange them. Illyrio's smile faltered. Slavers' Bay is unruly, the Giscari lords. We'll kneel, Viserys said, and the hatchlings hissed at his tone, embers dancing between their teeth. See to it, Magister, I depart at dawn. The summer sea was calm beneath a sapphire sky, when Illyria's fastest cog, the Golden Sphinx, slipped from Pentoshi harbor. Viserys stood at the prow. Dragons nestled beneath his cloak, their bodies warm against his ribs. Day by day they grew. On goat meat, on fish, on his whispered legends beneath moonlight. By the time the cog reached the island of cedars, Vaesophor's wings spanned 3 feet, and Oryx breathed short cones of flame that blackened sailcloth. The sailors watched with awe and dread, murmuring prayers to the Mother of Mountains, or the many-faced god, but they obeyed Viserys' every command. Fear was obedience's truest seed. Nights he spent reading weathered codices stolen from Illyrio, the murals of Keys, the scorpion gates of Yunkai, the labyrinth beneath Marine's great pyramid. He traced siege lines on maps, calculated distance between wells, imagined how dragonfire might funnel through narrow ways called the Winding Worm. But beyond tactics grew a subtler skill, listening to the dragon's silent speech. They spoke in images, wide-hot hunger, the joy of soaring thermals, the shimmer of prey. In return, he pushed visions of burning pyramids, of banners stitched with the 3-headed dragon, of thrones forged in living flame. The hatchlings trembled with instinctive delight. Some nights he feared the raw vastness of their wills. Other nights he relished it, certain no king in history had ever commanded such power so soon. At Volantis they acquired 3 black pearl galleys crewed by sellswords wearing striped tiger cloaks. Gold bought loyalty, dragons bought devotion. Captain Rhaego, a towering summer islander, vowed by his carved bone spear that he would follow Viserys beyond the edge of any map. They skirted the Valyrian Peninsula's smoking ruins, where stone men watched from fog-choked crags. Tenebrix circled the deck above the gray waters, screeching at winged shadows in the mists. Viserys wondered if ancient rivalries still echoed in those clouds, if the dune's ghosts recoiled to see dragons rise again. When ash rained like snow on the sails, he felt the world pivot beneath his boots. 3 weeks later, the fleet anchored off Astapor. Brick towers loomed over the harbor, banners depicting the harpy clasping manacles. Slaves in red collars raised their eyes to the sunlight glinting off dragon wings and gasped. Viserys ordered no assault, not yet. He needed more than terror. He needed message. At dusk, he rowed a skiff to the city's seawall. Dragons perched on each shoulder, and demanded parley with the good masters. They ushered him into a hall tiled with pink and black marble, where a council of slavers reclined on cushions, confident in unsullied guards. Their spokesman, a thin man scented with cloves, offered tepid courtesies and tea sweetened with honey. Viserys declined both. "Sell me your unsullied," he said. "All of them." The hall rippled with amusement. "We would bankrupt ourselves," the spokesman replied. "1,000 unsullied costs." Viserys drew back his cloak. Vaesophor clung to his forearm, wings mantled. Oryx alighted on the slaver's lacquered table, and exhaled a wisp of flame that sent parchment curling. "Cost," Viserys repeated softly, "is a relative term." Negotiations ended when Tenebrix swooped through the open skylight and perched atop a brass idol, dousing it in fire until molten droplets spattered the floor. The good masters agreed to his price, 10,000 unsullied in exchange for promised plunder from Meereen. They escorted him through training pits, where boys greeted him with glassy eyes dulled by bell torture. But he forced his own gaze hard. He could not falter now. If he recoiled from the ugliness of the world would devour him. Those same boys would one day march beneath his banner. He would grant them purpose if not freedom. In corners of silence he wondered what Daenerys would have said. Yet her ashes could not argue. Drills began at dawn, unsullied forming spear walls, tilting shields to deflect imagined arrows, breaking rank only at his barked commands. He taught them the cry, Valerio Joriel, Valyrian for bend the knee, a warning to Meereen. Within a fortnight, the Unsullied marched with rhythmic thunder, bronze caps gleaming, eyes forward. Captain Rhaego brought news from Yunkai. Mercenary companies were gathering to aid Meereen, fearing Astapor's new warlord. Viserys welcomed the rumor. Each new foe was kindling. At last, sails unfurled for the Skahazadon's mouth. The Unsullied embarked beneath crimson dawn, the river running brown with silt beside them. Viserys stood on a quarterdeck flanked by dragons grown horse-sized now, their wings stretching like living storm clouds. He wore black vambraces engraved with Valyrian glyphs, a cloak of dark red leather stitched with silver thread. The soldiers cheered when he lifted his sword, a slender, arak-hilted blade he had named Iron, Bloodwing, and bade them march. The approach to Meereen proved arduous. Giscari forces had collapsed the river crossing at the Bridge of Crows, forcing Viserys to split columns around marsh flats where crocodiles thrive. Disease nipped at ranks, malarial shivers, but daily he strode among tents, dragons circling above, and morale flared anew. At twilight his beasts hunted great herons, returning with feathers dripping ichor. He fed them sheep from seized pastures, careful never to sate them fully. Hunger sharpened their fury. Scouts reported Meereen's defenses, walls 80 cubits high, bronze harpy at the apex of the Great Pyramid, slave soldiers, called brazen beasts, patrolling under harlequin masks. Ziga engines bristled along ramparts, scorpions, catapults, loaded with fired clay pots of boiling oil. Viserys surveyed these from a rise clogged with blue winter roses. He traced attack vectors in the dirt, yet something in him recoiled from the thought of plotting siege. Dragons were not meant to wait, neither was he. That night, he walked alone to the dragon's bivouac, a clearing ringed by charred tree stumps. Viserys lay coiled, scales shimmering serpentine. Tenebrix snapped at moths dancing near his nostrils. Viserys knelt, pressing his brow to the warm hollow between Ororic's wing joints. Tomorrow, he whispered, images flowing into their shared consciousness, walls crumbling, harpy falling, flame rolling like dawn over stone. The dragon's hearts thundered in reply. Across the camp, Unsullied felt a shiver crawl up spines, though no wind stirred. Dawn came ruddy, clouds bruised with violet. Trumpets blared as Unsullied formed wedge ranks at the tree line. Meereen's gates glittered in sunrise, studded with lapis lazuli. From atop the Great Pyramid, the bronze harpy's wings caught the first light. Viserys mounted a pale sand steed with silver mane, rode to the fore, and sheathed Exifaran across his back a moment before Viserys descended, claws raking earth within arm's reach. Gasps rippled through ranks. When Viserys climbed onto the dragon's shoulders, the gasp became a roar. The sky accepted him in a rush of vertigo and wind. Scales beneath him, flexed like armor of living jade. Aurix rose beside them, gold-to-pearl wings flashing, Tenebrix trailing smoke like a comet's tail. Meereen's walls drew near, ballista swiveling frantically. Quarrels shot upward, but Viserys banked with predatory grace. Viserys felt the twang of bowstrings as distant plucks, heard shouts as muffled echoes trapped in glass. High over the city he raised his sword. Sunfire skipped along its edge. To fire and blood. The high Valyrian words whipped away in the wind. Yet the dragons needed no tongue. Viserys folded wings, plummeted. The world narrowed to an arrow slit of falling speed. At the last heartbeat he flared, arresting momentum. Jaws yawning open. Fire erupted, emerald and orange. A torrent that slammed into Marine's northern wall, stone blackening, mortar exploding steam, Tenebrix dove after. Gout of purple heart flame cutting through wooden siege towers lining the parapets. Guards shrieked. Some leapt rather than burn. Aurorix circled behind, scorching the bronze harpy until it glowed red-g white. Then, with a thunderous crack, the statue toppled, smashing terraces, dislodging tiles that clattered like hail. Viserys exulted. Heat blistered his cheeks, smoke tore at his lungs, but glory sang louder. He directed Viserys toward the Gate of Chains, where iron-bound timbers shuddered under battering rams. Unsullied surged below, spears thrusting as Yunkish sellswords tried to stem the breach. From Dragonback Viserys saw gaps forming, arrow volleys thinning, the defenders faltering beneath fear more potent than steel. He aimed Viserys into the archway. Fire shot through, a spear of light, and the gate liquefied, rivulets of molten iron splashing across cobbles. Stone glowed cherry red. Men screamed. Shadows danced like demons on the citadel's inner walls. The Unsullied advanced, chanting Valerio Jariel. Behind them, sellswords tossed aside banners, fled toward docks already aflame. Slaves rose from barracks, seizing cudgels, joining the tide that flooded Meereen's grand avenues. But victory was not yet secure. From the Great Pyramid summit a massive trebuchet loosed a clay pot trailing green smoke. Wildfire, stolen from some Lycene chemist, perhaps. It arced toward Aurorix, who swerved, but the pot burst near his left wing, igniting in viridian conflagration. The dragon roared, banking hard, spiraling toward rooftops. Horror stabbed Viserys' mind, their bond quaked. He spurred Viserys down, weaving through columns of rising ash. Tenebrix swooped alongside, shrieking rage. Aurorix crashed through a silk market, smashing awnings, tail lashing. Flames clung to his scales, eating at membrane. Viserys leapt from Viserys before the dragon fully landed, sprinting across shattered tiles, heedless of the heat blistering his boots. He reached Aurorix's side and pressed both palms to smoking hide, summoning every shard of their bond. Images drowned him. Wind across deserts, the taste of goat marrow, the ache of molten pain. He pushed back visions of cool night, river water, the promise of endless sky. Tenebrix clawed open a reservoir tower nearby, and water gushed like silver ribbons across the square. As it washed over Aurorix, the green-gold fire sputtered, hissed, died, leaving pitted scars, but life still beating in the mighty chest. Viserys sagged, trembling, but Aurorix nudged him upright, eyes molten with gratitude. Oars it resolved. Around them, Meereen burned. The Unsullied had breached the lower terraces, banners bearing the Raid Khan black dragon flying from balconies. Slaves unchained other slaves, calling his name. Eris reborn, Stormborn, Dragonlord Dot. Yet pockets of resistance clung to the pyramid's shadow. Brazen beasts rallied, horns echoing, and siege scorpions still loosed iron bolts. He climbed atop Tenebrix now, leaving Aurorix to gather strength. Together with Viserys, they rose through drifting ash toward the pyramid. A bolt grazed Tenebrix's flank, sparks skittering, but the dragon barely flinched. Atop the pyramid Viserys saw the Overseer of Graces, a woman in scaled robes of lapis and gold, standing defiantly beside two boy hostages bound at the wrists. Her voice boomed through a brass horn, offering parley. Viserys considered. Every tale of rule warned that cruelty without temperance bred rebellion, yet mercy too freely given bred contempt. The brink between fear and reverence was a blade's edge. He guided Tenebrix to hover just beyond scorpion range. Smoke eddied. Heat shimmered. "Release them," he shouted across the chasm. "Swear fealty, and your lives will be spared." The Overseer spat curses in Kaskari. A crossbow string snapped. Viserys watched one boy crumple, bolt through his heart. A taste like iron filled his mouth. Rage, sorrow, memory of a sister sold to a horse lord. "So be it," he breathed. Tenebrix wheeled, beating wings that churned sooty air, creating whirlwinds that scattered archers. Vetsophore dove, flame spiraling, and scorched the scorpion crews. Viserys stood upon Tenebric's shoulders, cloak snapping, and leveled Exhafaron, letting rip a primal cry older than language. Fire answered. The upper tiers caught first, tiled roof melting, statues collapsing into molten streams. The overseer vanished in a curtain of white-hot ruin, her horn clanging as it fell. Hours blurred. Streets became rivers of smoke. Screams gave way to stunned silence. The harpy's toppled carcass smoldered amid cracked granite. At dusk, Viserys paced the throne room carved inside the pyramid, an echoing cavern of marble columns and mosaics depicting Kaskari victories that now crumbled under dragon talons. He seated himself upon the master's stool. A slab of polished jade worked into the harpy's likeness, and felt its chill seep through his armor. Unsullied filed in, helms under arms, spears lowered in salute. Captain Rhaego knelt next, presenting a ring of gilded keys. Gates, vaults, granaries. Slaves entered last, bearing torches, their eyes reflecting flame and hope. Viserys rose, blood drying on his cheek. Dragon shadow looming behind him. From this night, he declared, voice raw yet ringing, Meereen belongs to House Targaryen. Slavery is ended. All chains are broken. The words felt strange, forged in the furnace of his sister's lost dreams. But as he spoke them, the hall trembled with muted cheers, sobs of disbelief. He saw in their upturned faces not merely obedience born of fear, but a birth of something purer. Allegiance. Ulric's, bandaged in linen salved with myrrh, limped beside him, nostrils glowing. Viserys laid a hand on the dragon's scarred neck and felt a steady pulse. There would be scars across Meereen as well, bridges to rebuild, granaries to restock, rival cities yet to subdue. War would not end here. Yet amid the smoke, he sensed a horizon widening like dawn. Dragons had woken, and with them, a king. Between the rising pillars of ash and torchlight, Viserys Targaryen saw 5 future years unfolding. Convoys down the Skahazatan flying his sigil, cities bending knee, fleets of Volantene triremes scuttled off Cape Wrath, ravens winging westward across the narrow sea, bearing word now, no laughingstock, but the conqueror reborn. No beggar now, no laughingstock. He stepped forward, grip tightening on Exhafaron's hilt, and the dragons echoed his growl, their eyes twin suns in the dark. Outside, night settled over Meereen, but above its shattered pyramids, 3 newborn shapes wheeled against stars, tracing a sigil no Kaskari helm could mistake. Fire and blood had come, and the world would burn anew until only wings whispered across its ashes. Gay. Smoke hung over Meereen, like a wounded dragon's wing, its underside bruised purple, where dusk pressed against the last coals of day. When night slipped in, the ash over the city cooled into a fine gray shroud that settled on pyramids, on shattered statuary, on the shoulders of slaves who had never tasted such silence. After the thunder of conquest, stillness felt almost sacrilegious, yet Viserys allowed it, decreeing one full turn of the moon without drums, without horns, without a rattle of chains or the whip-crack of overseers. Let the city breathe, he told his council of captains. Let its people measure the new air and decide whether it was sweet or poisoned. Only then would they understand that a dragon's reign was not merely terror, but transformation. He held council in the hall of 1,000 columns, a cavernous chamber whose polished marble floor now shimmered with mirages cast by braziers. The slavers' thrones had been hauled away and melted into ingots, their harpy finials snapped off, wings twisted beyond recognition before being offered to the forge. In their place stood a single long table of dark teak, carved with river serpents, surrounded by mismatched chairs, collected from noble manors, hastily abandoned. Captain Rhaego presided at Viserys' right, bronze skin gleaming in lamplight, while to his left sat Missara the Whisper, a freed scribe whose quick hand and quicker mind had been purchased for 2 silver honors the day of the sack. Beyond them arrayed themselves the 3 eldest of the unsullied, unhelmeted, so that the council might see the stern humanity of the once nameless. Tenebrix lay coiled behind Viserys' chair, half dozing, the rise and fall of his breath stirring dust off the tiles in gentle eddies. Viserys perched above on a balcony rail, tail curled tight, eyes half-lidded yet vigilant. Ulrich remained sequestered in a courtyard of black glass, where healers tended his burns. But Viserys kept part of his mind tethered to the dragon even now, feeling the steady climb of strength within wounded flesh. "Rations first," Misara said, quill poised. The fires consumed 3 East End granaries, and a 4th collapsed under fleeing crowds. "What remains might feed the city for a month if we impose half rations." "Half rations breed resentment," countered Rhaegar. "Resentment breeds knives in the dark." Viserys tapped a finger on the table. "Open the vaults beneath the pyramid. The slavers stored seed grain for lean years. Share it freely, but brand each sack with the dragon. Let no belly forget who fills it." Quills scratched. The Unsullied exchanged curt nods. Next came the matter of sewage. Cisterns cracked, canals choked with corpses, the stench threatening plague. Viserys assigned the former pitmasters to the work under Unsullied oversight, promising food and a clipped copper coin for every wagon of filth carted beyond the walls. By dawn, men once feared for cruelty were grappling sludge, their whips replaced by shovels. Some spat curses, but they labored, for dragons watched the sky and the Unsullied watched the streets. In the low city, embers still glowed where fires had raged hottest. Viserys walked those quarters nightly, cloaked and unarmed save for the presence of tenebricks gliding overhead. Freedmen knelt when they recognized him. Children reached small hands toward his passing. He would pause then, lowering his hood, letting them touch the folds of his cloak or the pommel of Exifaran. Their eyes shone brightest when they glimpsed the dragon above, its vast shadow rolling over cracked rooftops like thunder without sound. But not all gazes held awe. In alleys, Viserys felt hatred cling to him like cobweb. Former masters who hid behind boarded windows, whispering of the day Kaskari pride would rise again. He saw red cloaks flit through torchlight, quick as fox ghosts. The Shavatates men, freed gladiators who styled themselves scourges of slavers. Their zeal troubled him. Justice, he knew, required spine, but it also required leash. The Shavapate wore no leash. One moon's turn passed. The ash cooled into powder, fine enough to drift on the slightest breath. Aurorix emerged from convalescence, his scarred left wing now banded with streaks of purple hide. Ugly, yet strong. Viserys mounted him at dawn and soared above fields north of Marine, where the old masters had once grown hemp for rope. With a single blast of flame he set a quarter-acre alight, then guided the dragon in tight spirals, daring the newly healed wing to bear stress. Aurorix answered with roaring vigor, slicing a corkscrew of ember-flecked wind through the smoke column before banking into a climb so steep Viserys' vision narrowed to sparkling pinpoints. He laughed in that high thin air, giddy. The wound had not crippled his child. It had tempered him. Upon landing he found emissaries from Yunkai waiting within the pyramid's shadow. They wore robes dyed the color of old saffron and spoke in a precise trader's Valyrian. Their gifts were modest. A torque of beaten copper, a scroll praising his enlightened liberation of Marine, and a barbed offer of alliance against Astapor. Viserys smiled, accepted nothing, and sent them home with a cage of yellow canaries, symbols, he explained, of Yunkai's own future should they toy with deceit. As they departed, Viserys dipped low over the walls, loosing a spate of sparks that set the embassy banner ablaze. Word of the insult flew faster than any raven, and within a fortnight spies reported Yunkish warships gathering, red sails stitched with the harpy's claw clenched tight. War was inevitable, but Viserys refused to rush toward it. Each dawn he drilled the Unsullied not in their familiar phalanx, but in broken skirmish formations better suited to city fighting. He appointed Misara mistress of whispers, her ears attuned to the pulse beneath Marine's flagstones. She uncovered stash houses of bitter old masters, stockpiling blades and obsidian vials of toxin. Each cache the Unsullied removed at night, quiet as cats, until rumors said that even stone walls conspired with the Dragonlord. While soldiers trained and rumors slithered, Viserys studied scrolls of ancient Valyria. One crumbling codex, rescued from the doom by a mad Volantine archivist, spoke of the Second Bond, an unproven rite allowing Dragon Lord and Dragon to blend breath and blood, forging a deeper communion. The cost was pain bordering on madness. The reward, if legend held, was near prophetic union of will. He read by braziers, wind sighing through shattered latticework, the night's chill gnawing at his spine. And he wondered, would pain not already endured be wasted, if greater power lay beyond it? Autumn's breath cooled the Skahazadon. Reeds yellowed, the river's silt redoubling like blood from an opened vein. Flocks of white egrets passed overhead, arrowing south. Viserys stood one dusk upon the Walk of Kisses, a marble gallery thrusting from the pyramid's upper tier, and watched sunfire glint off Oreric's hide as the dragon hunted among the reeds. Infinity seemed to spool out before him, all of Essos a chessboard visible in the mind's eye. In that hush, he felt Daenerys near, or perhaps only his memory of her, small and bright as the first candle glimpsed by a prisoner released from darkness. He spoke to the wind, promising her justice for the song cut short in the red wastes. The wind answered with the distant drum of wings. Nisara approached quietly. "Letters," she said, "from Westeros." She handed him two, one sealed with 3 obsidian arrows, the sigil of House Blackfire reborn in exile, the other plain, splotched by seawater. He broke the plain seal first, expecting threats from some Kiskari remnant. Instead, ink greeted him in a careful yet unpolished hand. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard, retired and exiled, begged audience to offer sword and counsel in the city of Korath. Viserys read twice, heart a fluttering thing. Barristan the Bold had been his father's shield, then his killer's. Could such a man now kneel to the sun? Intrigue thrummed under the words. The second letter, from Blackfire Scions, bristled with flatteries and pledges to raise a sellsword company in his name, if only he would reclaim the Iron Throne first. He smiled at the irony. Bastard descendants of a usurper king now begged the true dragon to justify their existence. He bade Nisara draft replies, warm but distant, while he prepared to call the second bond. Tenebrix chose the rookery roof for the right, its basalt turret jutting unguarded into a night heavy with bruised clouds. Viserys painted sigils on the dragon's breastbone in his own blood, a spiral of 3 talons encircling a flame. Tenebrix watched, golden eyes slow blinking, as if the sting of the blade that scored Viserys' palm were merely some faint curiosity. When the sigil was complete, Viserys licked the daggers flat, tasting iron sharp as childhood poverty, and cut the same shape onto his chest. Wind snarled around them. Lightning trembled within the cloud bellies. At the first rumble of thunder, Tenebrix lowered his wedge-shaped skull, nostrils steaming hot enough to sear goose flesh. Viserys pressed his bleeding chest to the dragon's and spoke the Valyrian word for binding. Hagus. Pain exploded, white and blinding. A spear of ice smashed into molten copper. The world jerked sideways. His vision broke apart, reassembled in shards. He saw himself through draconic sight, a glowing thing of fragile bone. He felt Tenebrix's massive heart pulsing slow and thunderous, heard thoughts like distant bells tolling hunger, sky, ember dream. Fire danced on his tongue, yet there was no flame in his mouth, only sensation magnified until it devoured itself. When the storm burst overhead, it seemed part of their blood, lightning veins lacing twin hearts. Morning found him sprawled upon the rookery roof, slick with rain. Tenebrix lay curled about him, wings forming a makeshift call shielding them from wind. When he stirred, the dragon stirred. When he breathed, the dragon's breath echoed. Their eyes met, and something passed, a knowing deeper than loyalty. He rose without shakiness, though blood still trickled from the cuts. Tenebrix unfolded to full height, gave a low rolling call that woke pigeons from their nests, and leapt into the brightening sky. Viserys watched, unchanged in form yet subtly altered. His limbs felt more certain, the beat of his heart resonant with some vast underdrum thrumming through bones and city alike. That same day, scouts reported Yunkai's fleet had anchored at Daznak's Horn. 70 warships strong, disgorging cohorts of sellswords. Second Sons, Stormcrows, Long Lances, bolstered by Kiskari legionaries. They dug trenches, erected scorpions aimed landward, and sent heralds demanding the return of all slaves. Viserys gathered his captains in the Hall of 1,000 Columns. Debate raged: naval ambush behind the barrier isle, night assault across the marsh flats, or stand behind Meereen's walls and starve them. Viserys listened, then raised a hand. "No plan survives dragonfire," he said. "Yet dragonfire alone is not a plan. We will feign weakness, offer parley, and set their pride alight." On the first day of the new moon, Yonkai's envoys rode under white flag toward Meereen Tier. Viserys awaited them in a pavilion outside the river gate, its silken roof striped black and red. Tenbrix dozed behind, half concealed by reeds. The envoys dismounted stiff-backed, wary of the unsullied guard, but confident in their numbers. Their spokesman delivered the terms: restore slaves, pay reparations, surrender one dragon as surety. Viserys pretended to consider, sipping wine from a cracked onyx cup. "My terms," he replied, "are simpler. Lay down arms, free every slave, and bend the knee by sunrise. Or choose fire." They laughed, though one's eyes flicked nervously at the reeds. Viserys set his cup aside, rose, and spoke a single word in the tongue he now shared with Tenebris. A ripple shook the marsh. Tenebris emerged, scales rattling water from his hide. Flame licked between needle teeth. The envoys scrambled, horses screamed. Viserys raised his hand, and Tenebris halted, exhaling only a tongue of heat that set carrion flies dropping out of the air, burnt mid-buzz. "Go," Viserys said. "Carry courage to your masters." They fled. He watched them reach the barricades an hour later. From the pyramid's peak he saw the flutter as their banners wavered. Within Yonkai's lines, arguments broke like surf against unseen reefs. But still they arrayed siege towers. Still they dragged scorpions through mud. Still their war drums pounded through the night. Pride dug deeper than terror. On the morrow, Viserys donned armor of matte black leather scaled with lapis shards scavenged from the shattered harpy. Rhaego commanded a rear column of Unsullied to march up the riverbank, spears tipped with obsidian glass flame hardened in dragonfire. Viserys released a rumor, true enough, that Arorix's wounds had left only one dragon fit to fly. The Yunkish commanders lapped it up, convinced their scorpion bolts would find frequent, solitary target. Night fell moonless, yet Meereen's sky flickered with pale foxfire. Greenish sheets of light seldom seen this far south. Old fisher crones muttered of omens. Viserys whispered that the heavens themselves had come to watch. He mounted Tenebris 2 hours before dawn. Shrouded in a cloak, dyed the deep brown of river silt. Viserys launched first, wings thumping the night. Tenebris followed at low altitude, clinging to shadows along the swollen Skahazadon Tia. Below, Unsullied crept through reeds, oil-soaked torches tied unlit to their belts, waiting for a signal that would shine brighter than any torch. It came when Viserys reached the Yunkish lines and loosed a roar that shook dew from every blade of grass for miles. Scorpions swiveled. Ballista crews fired blindly into darkness. Their quarrels fell harmless, wet black shafts splashing into marsh. The second roar preceded flame. Viserys made no grand passes. He spat narrow jets, precise, at powder kegs, wagons of pitch, at the central ammunition dump where barrels of naphtha waited. The explosion ripped the night open, painting tents and men and siege towers in silhouette against a wall of livid orange. As every gaze turned skyward, Tenebris soared through the flames rising from the river itself, oil slicks ignited by Viserys' breath. The dragon bore Viserys across a living bridge of fire that dazzled even the Unsullied hidden close by. At his shouted word, they lit their torches and charged, a black tide under red banners. Yonkai's flank collapsed in minutes, panic racing faster than commands. Yet still, their center held, anchored by sellsword captains who bellowed for formation, hacking deserters with tulwars to stem flight. Viserys targeted them, swooping so low his boot toes brushed helm crests. He leaned from saddle, swung ex-Shifaran. The Valyrian forged edge cleaved skulls like melon rind. One captain raised a shield. Tenebris bit through wood and bone, flinging the man screaming into a catapult frame. The sellsword standard fell. Chaos rippled out. Viserys landed amid splintered wagons, and ordered Tenebrix to guard the rear. He drew a torch from a corpse belt, set a line of naphtha aflame, and marched up it toward the heart of the Yunkish camp. Flames roared aside like curtains pulled back for a stage. Unsullied spears glittered behind him. Each step eroded Yunkai's resolve. Each heartbeat pounded like drums carved from their own chest cavities. When dawn cracked, the horizon revealed ruin. Siege towers collapsed, scorpions bent into molten question marks, Yunkish banners smeared across mud. Survivors knelt in droves, dropping blades into scarlet puddles. Viserys accepted their surrender with a nod, but Rhaego stood beside him bearing shackles. This time, Viserys proclaimed, voice carrying over wind and groan, no chains. Those who fought for coin may go in peace. Those who fought to keep men chained will labor now to build what they burn. The distinction, he knew, was razor thin, yet it gleamed like justice in the morning sun. He spared few further words for victors' feasts. Instead, he walked among the wounded, directing dragonfire cautery where old leeches could not keep pace with severed arteries. Tenebrix lowered his muzzle so that healers might heat bronze knives in his breath. Viserys perched atop a broken siege tower, eyes sweeping for treachery. Aurorix, yearning sky again, circled high overhead. Proof that dragons, like kings, healed by refusing to break. In Marine's plazas, newly freed men painted murals of the battle, dragons framed by a green aurora, unsullied spears glinting in eclipse of flame. Viserys studied one depiction for a long time. The artist had placed him at the center, cloak flaring like wings, sword lifted. It showed him larger than life. He suspected it felt true. That night, he dined not with captains, but with children rescued from fighting pits. 36 boys and girls whose backs still bore lash marks. They sat cross-legged on silk rugs in the hall of 1,000 columns, eating honeyed dates and melon slices off golden trays. Tenebrix stretched nearby, purring under small hands scratching scales between his eyes. One girl, no older than 8, asked if the Dragon Lord could make stars move. Viserys knelt to answer that stars moved for none save time. But dragons could teach men to see new ones. She laughed, sticky with melon, and hugged his neck. Sentries found him later on the palace roof, gazing at constellations strange to northern eyes. Your Grace, one said, a rider approaches under Volantine colors. Viserys nodded. Word had traveled quickly. Volantis sensed opportunity. Offer coin and fleets to this upstart dragon lord, perhaps secure favor before he crossed the narrow sea. Yet he felt no haste for Westeros now. Let that iron crown wait a little longer. Here, in these scorched bays, he forged something rarer than a throne. A cause. Still, ships could not be ignored. He sent Rhaego with 20 galleys to patrol the Straits of Khal, ordering them to harry slavers' lanes, but spare Volantine merchantmen unless provoked. We will teach them caution, he told the captain, not enmity. Meanwhile, Missara cultivated agents in Astapor's shattered oligarchy, fanning civil strife that might bloom into collapse. Viserys intervened only once, forbidding assassination of a reform-minded bricklord who fed freedmen from his stores. We conquer hearts, he reminded her, by showing we can bear their weight. Dragons grew. By snowmelts first trickled down the painted mountain passes. Viserys' wings cast a shadow large enough to blanket half a training field. Tenebrix could swallow a goat whole. Aurorix, though scarred, mastered abrupt wing-overs that left birds stunned mid-flight. Viserys flew with them daily, mapping wind currents, learning to read the subtlest twitch of tail that presaged a dive. In those hours he forgot the ache of crowns, lost himself in the raw immortal joy of air and speed and shared pulse. Sometimes he would glimpse a pale flicker in the corner of his vision, like a memory of silver hair streaming behind a younger dragon, but when he turned only sky awaited. He spoke to that ghost nonetheless, telling Daenerys of every triumph, every shadow of doubt. Doubt crept in when reports arrived of sickness sweeping refugee camps north of the river. Pale mare, the Astapori called it. Shit water and vomit mixed until bodies shook themselves empty. It killed horses first, then men, and fear galloped faster than contagion. Viserys ordered quarantine lines drawn 10 yards broad, ditch and stake. Food wagons delivered provisions to the ditch edge, their drivers masked with salted veils. Some cried cruelty, but Misara reminded him that mercy unchecked could slaughter 10 for everyone it saved. He visited the quarantine at dusk, unarmored, walking alone save for Viserys shadowing overhead. Survivors wept to touch his hand. The dying raved of dragons in their dreams. When he returned, ash streaked his boots black as funeral soot. One night in the third turning of the moon, a masked figure infiltrated the pyramid via forgotten drain sluice. The assassin slipped into Viserys' bedchamber with a dagger coated in manticore venom, only to discover the bed empty, dragonfire glimmering in the heart. A low hiss uncoiled behind him. Tenebrix emerged from a shadowed archway, eyes lambent. He pinned the assassin beneath one taloned foot, crushing ribs like straw dashru. Viserys stepped in from the balcony, cloak snapping in wind, and dismissed the guards who rushed to answer screams. He questioned the dying man himself, gleaning only that coins had come from a merchant syndicate of new guys. As life fled the assassin's eyes, Viserys glimpsed hatred there so bright, it seemed a second flame. He wondered if his own eyes looked so when Robert took the throne. Morning brought news that a slave revolt in Astapor had toppled the Council of Masters. But without discipline, the rebels devolved to looting. Misara urged quick march. Take the city now before Yunkai does. Rhaego agreed, seeing Astapor as a sword pointed at Meereen's back. Viserys weighed the cost. Dragons could end the chaos. But each firestorm sowed seeds of future famine. Instead, he dispatched Ororix and a flight of unsullied veterans as peacekeepers, instructing them to break no chains, raise no banners, only restored the wells and markets. Rhaego frowned but obeyed. Within a fortnight, letters arrived from grateful freedmen, pledging allegiance to the dragon, who came not as conqueror, but caretaker. Viserys tucked those missives beside Barristan's unopened reply. Winter crept south upon winds, laden with desert grit. In the high passes, sellsword hosts that once served Yunkai now roved masterless, raiding way stations. Viserys summoned their leaders to treat in Meereen's grand bathhouse, steam curling around marble pillars. Naked, save for scars, they parleyed, wary beneath the watchful eyes of Unsullied at every door. The Dragonlord offered gold for service, salt for loyalty, fire for betrayal. Half agreed on the spot. The rest left muttering. By night's end, 2 captains lay dead in scalding pools, throats opened ear to ear, and their companies accepted the coins. The bathhouse water ran pink for days, yet the city's fountains never flowed clearer. At year's turn, Meereen celebrated Groleo's Fair, a festival older than Valyria, when lanterns carved of salt crystal lit every street. Viserys ordered the lanterns dipped in dragonfire, so that each glowed with inner ember hues, red, green, violet, matching his children's scales. The spectacle dazzled, reflecting off canals until the city seemed a net of living jewels. From a balcony he watched freedmen dance with former pit fighters, Unsullied tapping spears to keep rhythm while children spun streamers into the night. He saw no highborn slaver mantles, no harpy masks. The harpy had been ground to dust. Just past midnight, Misara joined him, cheeks flushed from festival wine. "They love you," she said, gazing at the braided lights. "They love the idea of me," he answered. "Ideas burn brighter than flesh, yet flesh bleeds." She studied him. "And kings? Kings bleed most." He sipped persimmon wine, savoring its sweet as regret aftertaste. "Tomorrow they may curse my name when rations falter or rain will not bless their rice. Then tomorrow we remind them why the dragon's shadow shelters." Misara's smile held iron. He marveled how quickly a scribe could become a statesman when flame licked old certainties away. In the hush after revels, when torches guttered and dregs of wine turned vinegar on the tongue, Viserys walked alone to the roof where once he'd bound himself to Tenebrix. The dragon rested there still, but now both Viserys and Ororix flanked their sibling, 3 vast shapes folded into one. He settled between them, back against warm scale. They breathed as one. Inhale, exhale, 3 hearts thrumming the same subterranean song. Viserys felt the world spin, slow and mighty, beneath night's ceiling. Somewhere high above those wheeling stars, destiny wrote itself across black parchment in letters of flame too bright for mortal eyes. Yet he believed he could almost read them now. Dragons had taught him grammar. Meereen had given ink. The Balk kings of Westeros would supply parchment enough. He slept there, cradled between shadows, and dreamed of a sea, calm as glass. On its far shore rose towers of reddish stone crowned with banners that bore not harpies, but the three-headed dragon. In the dream he stepped ashore, unopposed, and felt soft earth give beneath his boots. Yet when he bent to touch it, the ground rippled into scales, black and gleaming, and a single great eye opened in the soil. It looked at him without fear or favor, an eye older than mountains. He woke with dawn, heart hammering, certain the dream was omen. But whether it prophesied victory or doom, he could not yet tell. Another moon waned. Trade resumed along the Skahazadon, though now each caravan paid tithe to the dragon's coffers. Grain, timber, copper ingots. Viserys invested coin in aqueduct repairs, in weavers' guilds employing freedmen at honest wage, in harbor cranes able to unload 2 galleys at once. He minted new coinage stamped with his profile, flanked by 3 rising worms, flooding the market so quickly that old Giscari slaver coins became curiosities. When a merchant complained that the dragon's silver was of lesser purity, Rhaego threw him into a pen of tame goats, declaring any man who looked a gift dragon in the teeth deserved horns to the rump. The story spread. Soon the silver circulated unchallenged. Yet outside the New Order's glow, the world muttered. Qohor mailed a white elk hide demanding tribute for unsafe magics practiced east of their holdings. Braavos hinted at embargo should slave revolts threaten bank interests. And in Westeros, word arrived of King Robert's hunt gone awry. His death, followed by the crowning of a boy king. Viserys read the Raven Scroll thrice, savoring its irony. The usurper dead by drink and bore, the realm weakened by a child's crown. Some of his captains urged immediate crossing. Strike while they flounder, Rhaego urged. Your father's throne lies half-shattered. But Viserys remembered smoke over Meereen, remembered pale children dying of the mare plague, remembered the assassin's eyes. A wooden house can burn itself, he said. We will arrive when ashes settle and build anew. Instead, he sent secret letters to Dorne, to the Reach, to the Eyrie, invoking promises whispered long ago by lords wary of Baratheon might. He promised dragons and justice in equal share. In anticipation, he commissioned Shipwright's Wharf to carve hulls of black cedar, reinforced with bronze spar caps shaped like open dragon jaws. He named the first keel Daenerys. Watching its skeleton rise upon the slips, he felt a pang. Blood debt owed to the sister he had once scorned. Wood creaked, hammers rang, and the smell of fresh tar mingled with the sun-sweet perfume of river lilies drifting on dusk. He wondered if forgiveness could travel such scents. The season turned once more. Storms tore sails in harbor, yet the granaries brimmed. Nysera's spies whispered that New Gis plotted alliance with Korth to restore slaving routes, choked by Viserys' embargo. He dispatched Aurorix, the scarred now fiercer than ever, to circle New Gis's walls, scorching only the outlying salt pans. No war declared, only reminder. Meanwhile, he invited Qartheen envoys to tour Meereen's rebuilt fighting pits, now repurposed as amphitheaters for plays exalting freedom's virtues. The envoys returned to Qarth with heads full of new entertainments and hearts thumping caution. Through it all, Viserys kept counsel with dragons. Their minds matured like wildfire, unpredictable, potent. Viserys showed growing disdain for crowds, preferring lofty solitude. Tenebrix remained ever watchful, guardian more than weapon. Aurorix, tempered by pain, relished flight above all, sometimes vanishing for days inland, returning with hides of strange striped cattle claimed from nomad raiders. Viserys learned to yield to these impulses, guiding rather than commanding, for even a king must not clamp iron too tightly around living flame. On the eve of the 2nd anniversary of Meereen's fall, he stood atop the Great Pyramid, the same place where the bronze harpy had once spread wings. Now the apex bore a new sigil. 3 intertwined dragons fashioned from wrought iron, their tails weaving into tricursal knot. Below, thousands gathered in torchlit concentric circles. Freedmen, unsullied, sellswords sworn and un, merchants from Volantis and Lys and distant Et, children upon shoulders, old men leaning on canes of carved cedar. They chanted a single word that rolled like surf. Dracarys. Fire. Viserys lifted his sword toward the stars no mortal could touch. Dragons rose behind him, 3 plumes of scale and sinew. Their combined roar made torches gutter, made hearts stutter, drew sparks from stone. In that sound Viserys heard the mournful echo of Valyria broken, but also the bright near future where dragonfire would temper a new realm, not of chains but of flight. He spoke then, though the crowd could scarce hear above their own thunder. Yet all swore later they caught each syllable, for his voice carried on the wings beating overhead. I was born among dead kings, he said. I stand tonight among living souls. Between those points lies a road paid for in pain and flame. Walk it beside me a while longer, and we will shape dawn. Tenebrix inhaled. Betzofor joined. Aurorix, last, gathered breath so deep the mosaic underfoot quivered. Flame burst skyward. 3 pillars merging into one pyre so bright the stars dimmed. Its heat kissed every upturned face. In that moment, Meereen became more than city. It became a forge. And Viserys Targaryen, once a beggar, once a mad exile mocked by tavern minstrels, felt the world's great wheel pause. For the span of a breath, he held its rim. Then the wheel turned forward at his urging, and the future spun out like silk, drawn through hungry flames, waiting to be woven into banners that would one day fly over not merely Meereen, but every keep from the summer isles to the icy wall where legends slept. He lowered his sword. The dragons banked together, wings overlapping like pages of a book closing on some yet-written chapter. Dawn, pale and tentative, found them still circling, casting shadows stitched with fire across a realm waking to new laws, laws written first in ash, now etched in rising sun. Kaki. Shanna. The wind that stroked the Skahazadon at dawn felt colder than any river breeze Viserys had known. It smelled faintly of snow. Impossible this far south, and yet the chill of it whispered warning. He stood at the prow of the silver hull galley Daenerys, sunrise glimmering on her newly tarred planks, and watched mist coil above bronze-colored water like breath from a sleeping leviathan. Behind him, Meereen glimmered beneath the first light, its pyramids no longer black husks, but towers of polished stone banded in ribbons of newly quarried marble. The work of 2 years, a work half finished and never still. No city born of conquest was ever truly quiet. Sails snapped, rigging hummed. Dozens of war galleys bobbed in formation across the river mouth, their figureheads carved as open dragon jaws, bronze reinforcements catching sunlight that turned each prow into a fang. The Grand Fleet's first drill awaited, 50 hulls forming an arrowhead, practicing breakthrough maneuvers against imaginary blockades. Viserys breathed salt and ambition. But before he could bellow orders, an arrow of black moved across the sky. Tenebrix stooped in sudden dive, banking steep over the deck. The dragon shrieked a warning note, wings flicking cold spray into sailors' eyes. Viserys felt the jolt through their bond. Danger rides the wind. A horn blew from the river gate tower. On the north bank, dust plumes spiraled. Scouts' banners flashed yellow. Riders incoming, urgent. Viserys gestured, and Daenerys pivoted shoreward as others followed. When the keel kissed mudflats, he leapt down into knee-deep silt, leaving crew to anchor. Tenebrix landed with a rumble, folding wings in the narrow strip of shoreline. The scouts arrived breathless, horses foam-flecked. "A host rides hard from Lizosh, your grace," their captain said, saluting with a dust-caked hand. 5,000 banners of the tall men and red wastes tribes. They burned villages 3 nights past. Survivors say they march beneath a banner of a great crimson eye. Viserys frowned. Not Yunkai, not Nug Hiss. Who leads? The scout swallowed. A woman in Kraken helm, they say, body-clad in black mail, calls herself the Mother of Sands. Now signed. Nisara the Whisper appeared at his side, stepping off a river skiff that had shadowed his galley. Rumor reached us yesterday, she murmured. An ironborn Reaver Queen, raiding the furthest Basilisk Isles. She claims descent from some forgotten Greyjoy. The tall tribes follow because she feeds them slaves and steel. Viserys grimaced. And now she feeds them stories of breaking a dragon lord. On the quay, crewmen muttered. Unease trickled like oil on water. For months the hinterlands had quieted, believing dragons shielded them. To learn marauders sliced through farms within a fortnight's ride threatened that hard-won faith. Oryx can burn them before they glimpse the city, Rhaego said, thumping across deck rails as he waded ashore. Bronze scale, armored, dripping river water. A single pass, and their courage turns to ash. Perhaps, Viserys answered. Yet ashes breed seeds of fear in the wrong direction. We show our strength too vast. We birth new coalitions of those who fear dragons more than reavers. We need a blow precise and instructive. He studied the mists, thoughts darting. The Crimson Eye must believe dragons slow, Meereen complacent. Teach her the lesson swiftly, but not with fire alone. Show the world that the Dragon Lord commands more than flame. He turned. Signal Astapor. Summon the Black Basilisk phalanx to reinforce the river wall. Rhaego ready 2,000 unsullied, half spear, half crossbow, field kits for forced march. Misara send ravens to every free village. Refugees may shelter behind Meereen's walls under dragon seal. Tell them the dragons ride to meet the storm. Tenebrix jerked his head skyward, impatient. Viserys laid a hand on the warm ridge above the dragon's eye. Soon, my friend. First we ride. Within an hour the city gate thundered open. Unsullied ranks spilled forth in river silver cuirasses, shields freshly painted with the rising wing banner. Behind them rumbled wagonettes bearing bolt throwers, each crewed by 4 crossbowmen sworn to accuracy or death. Above, Viserys and Oryx wheeled, shadows strobing across cobbled roads as citizens gathered on rooftops to cheer. They chanted Viserys' name, but he heard in their voices the deeper note. Protect us. Hold this fragile dawn you promised. He donned plain leather over polished greaves, choosing mobility over spectacle. Misara pressed a parchment into his gauntlet. Field maps drawn overnight by her scribes, marking oasis wells, ridgelines, the probable route of the Mother of Sands. On its margin, she had scribbled a note. Remember the Horse Lord's fear of loud thunder. Use wind, use night. He flicked a grin. Beyond the city, steppe grasses swayed beneath a sky scabbed with wandering cloud pox. The army marched for 2 days, halting only at dusk to water dragons. Tenebrix stalked the columns from above, casting intermittent shadows that cooled sweating backs. Campfires were forbidden. Instead, cold rations of dried date bread and salted goat passed down the lines. On the second night, pale aurora returned, veining the vault overhead. Ghostly ribbons that unsettled even hardened spearmen. Some whispered the lights were the souls of Valyrian kin returning to watch their last scion. Viserys lay awake, back against Tenebrix's flank, feeling power hum through those spectral curtains, as though the sky itself were a forge quenching some vast new blade. At dawn, scouts sighted dust riders cresting a distant ridge, vanguard outriders of the Crimson Eye. Viserys assembled his officers on a low hillock ringed by prickly scrub. Rhaego unfurled the map. Misara pinned down markers with shards of sun-bleached bone. The Unsullied would array in hollow square, bolt throwers at corners. Dragon passes would whip flanks, but the killing blow, Viserys decided, should be delivered by steel and discipline, not by fire alone. A message carved into flesh and rumor alike. The free cities are defended not only by monsters, but by men unafraid. The army settled into formation across a shallow vale, 2 leagues wide. Grasses knee-high hid the line's base. Beyond, baked earth cracked into plates like dead skin. Mid-morning brought the enemy. A seething tide of horsemen. Tall frames lacquered in crimson dust, faces veiled in tufts of dun fur. They rode shaggy steeds with horn insets on bridles. At their heart rolled chariots hammered from scavenged copper, axle blades flashing. and at the center towered a banner of black cloth, sewn with a staring blood-red eye. The Reaver Queen herself rode a rearing destrier. She truly wore a kraken-shaped helm, tentacles wrought of black iron swirling above her eyes. She carried no shield, only a barbed glaive riveted with lion bone. Over scaled breastplate, she wore ragged seabird feathers, a cloak that trailed like storm foam. When she halted out of bowshot, she lifted her helm horn, and a low war moan rolled across the flatland. A sound like whales lamenting through reef caves. Viserys walked forward alone, stopping within earshot. Tenebric circled overhead but did not descend. Viserys remained perched on a basalt crag behind the squared ranks. Dragon Lord. The Reaver Queen's voice rasped, bruised by brine and sand. Your city fattens on lies. My followers hunger for chainless flesh denied them by your walls. Yield 1,000 slaves for passage, and we march on to richer shores. Then she. Viserys stood still, gloved hand resting on Exifaran's pommel. There are no slaves in my realm. Then your realm ends today. She wheeled, directing her vanguard forward with a flicking of glaive. Horsemen began to trot. Crossbows lifted. Viserys drew Exifaran and held it high. Sunlight winked along Valyrian edges. Prismatic motes danced off rippled steel. In that instant, Tenebric's tucked wings and dropped like a thunderbolt, plowing through air into a dive so steep scarlet contrails ripped behind him. He leveled above Viserys' head at the height of 3 men, but no fire blossomed. Instead, Tenebric's unleashed a roar impossible in closeness. The shockwaves slapped grasses flat across 100 yards and flung riders sideways, horses rearing. The sound bored into skulls like hot metal, shattering eardrums of the nearest ranks. Several mounts bucked their riders. Chariot yokes snapped. Spoked wheels shattered. As the shock still rolled, unsullied crossbows fired from the corners, bolts with whistling holes drilled in the heads. They screamed through air like banshees, their shriek amplified by the lingering echo of Tenebric's roar. Horsemen panicked. Mounts swerved. Squares of infantry parted under stampede of their own allies. Viserys slashed his sword forward. The unsullied spearmen marched in disciplined silence, shields interlocked. They advanced under arrow fire, closing the hollow square into 2 long jaws. Red-eyed tall men crashed against that shield wall and fell onto spear points, their long limbs buckling. The Reaver Queen bellowed orders, rallying a wedge led by her chariot. She leveled her glaive and charged straight at the place where Viserys now mounted a waiting courser. No saddle, only rope reins. She sought dragon blood. He met her head on. The 2 horses thundered nearer. Hers armored with whalebone plates, his wrapped merely in cloth. She rose in stirrups to strike. Viserys ducked, boot brushing the grass, swung Exifaran upward. Valyrian steel bit through the glaive's haft, carving it apart. Sparks leapt. She hissed, turning to sweep the broken staff, but Viserys rolled under, slicing the horse's girth strap. The destrier reared, saddle sliding, queen tumbling. She landed in a twist and sprang upright, dagger flashing. Her helm's tentacles writhed with each motion as though alive. Before she could lunge, a shadow blotted the sun. Tenebric's again, dropping to perch just yards behind Viserys. He snapped jaws shut on nothing, teeth clashing like falling gates. The queen froze. Wind from the dragon's wings nearly toppled her. Her tall men shouted, but the whistling bolts screamed again, having their lines. Viserys dismounted and walked toward her. She raised her dagger. "Fight me." She spat through cracked lips. "I am," he said. Then, Viserys. The green copper dragon had been but a smudge on the horizon till then. Now he arrowed into view, fire already fuming from half-parted jaws. A single focused jet scoured the ground behind the queen, cutting a trench of melting glass that glowed white. Heat hit her like a battering ram. She staggered. Viserys swung the flat of Exifaran against her helm. The blow rang. She fell to knees. He placed the sword edge at the kraken visor. "You called for chains," he said. "Wear them." Later, bound in manacles, helm stripped, she knelt before him as the final tatters of her host fled. Unsullied dragged prisoners into lines, separating wounded from weapons. The vale smelled of singed wool and iron-rich dust. Viserys regarded the Reaver Queen's face, lean, salt-scarred, eyes pale like beach glass. Not mad precisely, but driven by hunger older than nations. "What price bought your road to Meereen?" he asked. "Hunger," she muttered. "The sea yields little. The wastes yield less. Your fertile river seemed ripe." Viserys nodded. "And if you had it, would you feed your people? Or feed their craving for conquest?" "Damn." She spat blood. "Conquest is food." He studied her a moment longer, then sliced the ropes from her wrists. Gasps rippled through unsullied, but none disobeyed. The queen rubbed swelling joints, confusion flickering. "You will return to your tribes," Viserys said. "Tell them what you saw here. Discipline forged with freedom. Dragons who roar but scorch only tyrants. Should you need land, I will show you river valleys where you might farm. Should you seek war, remember this day's echo." "Nyam." She opened her mouth, closed it, slowly bowed. When she rose, her gaze no longer scorched. Instead, it burned with something new, a glimmer of unwilling respect. Nysera drew near. "Mercy," she murmured. "Investment," he answered. "Even krakens may one day guard a harbor if fed." That night, campfires dotted the vale, allowed at last. Viserys walked through flickering haze, greeting unsullied veterans by name, clapping spears, praising crossbow crews. He found the Reaver Queen sitting alone upon a rock outcrop, hands resting on knees, staring at tenebricks curled in sleep. Without helm, she appeared younger, a scattering of silver along her temples, the only sign of years weathered. "You have name?" he asked. She blinked. "Asha Pike. But your free folk call me Mother of Sands." "Asha," he repeated. "Sands may yet bloom. Come dawn we ride home. Beyond the river mouth I will grant you 30 plots along the red oasis. Tend them under dragon law. Raid again, and we meet once more, without words." She chuckled, soft as tide over pebbles. "Your dragons are large, Dragon Lord. But you are larger." Viserys returned to his tent where parchment awaited. An ink-heavy scroll sealed with green wax, shaped like a weirwood leaf. The sender, House Stark of Winterfell. He broke the seal, heart thudding. The missive spoke in measured northern plain speak. Word of King Robert's death, of Lannister ascendancy, of edicts branding Targaryens traitors still, yet tucked at letter's end. An invitation for safe parley on Dragonstone should Viserys return west. Signed, Eddard Stark. Hand to King Joffrey. Honor and caution wrestled in each stroke. Viserys stared long at that signature, remembering half-memorized tales of Ned Stark's final ride into King's Landing. How but for him, perhaps, Robert would not have killed his father. He set the letter aside. Westeros loomed nearer, every whisper of raven wings. But today the Empire of Fire held firm in Essos, and its roots grew deeper than one autumn's battle. They marched to Meereen on roads lined by villagers waving reeds, throwing garlands at the unsullied vanguard. Children ran barefoot beside tenebricks, smoldering footprint, daring each other to touch the warm impressions. Food offerings lined waysides, date cakes, smoked carp, even jars of honey. Viserys accepted gifts with bowed head, but commanded they be redistributed to pale mare clinics, still plagued by sickness. Reputation fattened well enough on rumor. Bellies needed bread. At the gates, the city erupted in celebration. Drummers hammered copperhide, acrobats somersaulted under strings of lanterns shaped like dragons. The freed pits reopened not for blood sport but for feats of skill. Archers splitting reeds at 90 paces. Dancers balancing spinning blades on feet and elbows. Viserys rode through it slowly, clad in dust-gray cloak crusted with battle sweat. He raised no sword, lifted no cheers, simply nodded at faces shining with relief. Among waiting dignitaries stood Barristan Selmy, newly arrived from Korth. Age bent his shoulders yet failed to dim the clear blue eyes. He knelt, hair like pale frost at daybreak. Viserys dismounted, bade him rise with gentle shake. "I served your father," Barristan said. I failed him. Let me serve the sun." Viserys studied the man, seeing guilt etched deep, but honor deeper still. "Swear not to me," he answered. "Swear to the world we build." Barristan drew sword and laid it at Viserys' feet. "I swear on my life's remainder." The next weeks became tapestries of rebuilding. Asha Pike's tall tribes settled along the red oasis, exchanging spears for irrigation picks. Their children learned Hiskari words in makeshift schools, where formerly enslaved scribes taught letters beneath canvas awnings. Sailors from Volantis arrived daily, seeking cargo and excitement. In harborside inns, stories of the Battle of Crimson Eye multiplied, unsullied shields unbroken, bolts whistling like ghosts, dragons roaring thunder louder than storms. Every telling swelled Viserys' myth, yet he felt wary of myth seduction. Myth gilded men till cracks were forgotten, and then a single failure shattered all. So he worked. Walked granary inventories, tasted well water for brine, oversaw new foundries that poured bronze for plows instead of swords. He sparred with Barristan at dawn, blunt tourney blades clanging. The old knight's technique remained water-smooth, his valetudo advice sharper. "A king's wrist must never stiffen," he instructed. "Loose grip, else nerves lock at the worst moment." Viserys tempted those words into governance. Loose grip, guide, never clutch until bones grind. Winter's deepest night came, the long moon. By tradition, Marianites extinguished every hearth, lighting only braziers on city walls to ward spirits. Viserys climbed the Harpies' ghosts, ruins now reforged into the Dragonfire's tower, and stood on the pinnacle beneath a sky awash with unfamiliar constellations. Tenebrix perched behind him, wings furled. Across rooftops, the braziers flickered violet and green, fueled by rare salts mined upstream. An orchestra of wind chimes sang. Every household permitted one note, so that together the city made music impossible to map. A murmuration of sound. He felt the air thin around him, the hush of expectation. Dragons shifted, restless. Something pressed unseen at horizon's edge. He closed his eyes, reaching through the bond. Felt Vasophor sleeping atop the eastern wall. Warm presence pulsing. Felt Aurorix drifting above clouds, glimmering map of air currents and glowing lattice. He let his breathing match theirs. When he opened his eyes, a white star flared overhead, streaking north across the heavens. It bled a tail of crimson sparks that lingered unnaturally, like a cut across the firmament refusing to clot. Gasps rose from terraces. Chimes stuttered. Some knelt, praying to the red comet of old tales. Viserys watched, heart pounding. Omens seldom came gently. The star arced downward, vanished behind the painted mountains, leaving a scarlet smear that faded slow. "Portent," Missara whispered, having ascended unseen. She pressed a hand to the stone parapet. "Some will call it Dragon's Herald. Others, Doom." Viserys said nothing. Doom thrummed in his blood since birth. Herald or reminder, it changed little. The path remained forward until ground fell away and wings carried him into final sky. 3 nights later, a crippled messenger galley limped into harbor. Sails rent, hull gashed by reef or blade. Survivors babbled of a shadow fleet. Ships painted midnight, lanterns hooded, moving with uncanny speed. They flew a banner of golden lion astride a red field. Lannister colors far from home. Word spread. The boy king's regents had hired Lyseni corsairs to strike Meereen before dragons could cross sea. The lion meant to bite before the serpent sprouted legs. Viserys convened war council in evening gloom. Rhaego urged immediate counterstrike, burning the corsair fleet in port. Barristan counseled patience. Discover strength first, trap them in narrow seas. Missara revealed spies who named the Lyseni admiral, Oreo Lan, bastard cousin to House Lannister. Bounty promised. The Targaryens had pickled for King's Landing, 10,000 golden dragons' weight. Viserys listened, weighing risk. The fleet unfinished, Marines harbored defenses untested, yet allowing enemy navy to roam costlier. Dragons alone could not patrol every wave. They needed ships of loyal men. He stood, silencing debate. "We sail within the fortnight," he declared. "Daenerys leads. Ulrich scouts ahead, Viserys and Tenebric's guard holds. We intercept beyond Cape Wrath, crush their vanguard, and drive survivors home with stories carved in hulls." "Man," Barristan's brow furrowed. "If they lure dragons over open sea, ballista bolts tipped with scorpion venom." Viserys held up palm. "Dragons learn as we learn. Their flames cook storms, their wings outpace bolt arcs. And men obey when they see a king amongst them, not behind walls." Preparations surged. Carpenters labored under torch errant, foundries poured chain shot and forged harpoons shaped to tangle sail rigging. Barrel makers filled hogsheads with sand and oil, improvised incendiaries to hurl from catapults. Sail weavers sprawled wax canvas across plaza stones, painting crimson dragon sigils, broad enough to blind enemy gunners under glare. The night before departure, Viserys walked the docks alone. Gulls mewled, ropes creaked, tar smell mingled with star frost. He paused beneath Daenerys' prow where the figurehead, a dragon-mermaid hybrid with silver mane, glistened wetly. He laid hand on carved cheek. "Sister," he murmured, "tomorrow your namesake births thunder." A distant scrabble of boots, and Barristan stepped from shadow. He offered a leather scroll. "Draft of your will," he said softly. "Should you fall." Viserys took it but kept gaze on dark water. "If I fall, nothing I write survives. Even so, men take comfort in knowing you planned beyond yourself." The old knight's voice carried weight. He had seen kings die unprepared. Viserys broke seal, scanned lines. He had left all to the people of Meereen, property held in common trust until the dragons matured. Nysara named regent, Barristan commander, Rhaego lord steward. It felt thin, yet earnest. He tucked the will into belt pouch. "Thank you, Sir Barristan, but I do not plan to fall." Dawn spread violet along the east when the fleet slipped moorings. Drums boomed, sails bellied with wind conjured by Tenebric's downdraft. On shore, 100,000 voices rose in sorrow and pride. They watched their king stand at the prow, cloak billowing like a blood-red comet's tail, dragons soaring guard overhead. The river mouth widened into sea rim, waves slapping hulls with briny hands. Banners snapped, red on black, living declarations. 2 days at sail found them near Isle of Toads, volcanic spires jutting like jagged teeth. Scouts in swift catboats sighted black shapes beyond the reef. 20-odd war galleys flying no lights. Rhaego recommended night raid. Viserys agreed. He ordered all lanterns hooded. Clouds cloaked moon behind ragged veils. Stars winked seldom. Perfect. Pond. Oryx climbed unseen, blending into gloom. Water hissed across Daenerys' prow as oarsmen rode silent, every splash muffled by layered cloth. Catapults were readied, fuse ropes soaked in whale oil. Tenebric's patrolled starboard flank. Viserys lurked portside like living lighthouse snuffed out. They struck at second watch. Catboats raced ahead, grappling enemy hulls, hoisting oil kegs into lower decks. On signal from Barristan's horn, Tenebric's loosed a narrow jet of spark that ignited pinwheels of flame along rigging. In heartbeat, black galleys bloomed torch bouquets. Panic horns bleated. Crews scrambled to cut anchor lines, but chaos knotted their escape. Daenerys rammed the flagship, a lion-headed monstrosity bearing gilded scorpion turrets. Wood buckled, bronze plates screeched. Viserys leapt across gap before the prow finished scraping, landing amid tangle of ropes. Enemy marines charged, but he spun Exifaran in arcs of silver. Sparks flew as steel edge clanged against half-drawn cutlasses. Barristan followed, graceful as falling silk, his old blade punctured mail with deceptive ease. Oriolan emerged on the quarterdeck, clad in vermilion silk over fine steel. He carried a crossbow fitted with bow arms of spring steel. He fired once, bolt streaking at Viserys, who twisted, feeling fletching scuff hair. Before Lan could cock again, Viserys advanced. Their blades met, hiss of steel on steel. Lan fought deftly, using deck clutter between them, but rage threatened finesse. He snarled insults: beggar prince, false king, fire demon. Each syllable spat with venom. Viserys let words roll off like rain on plate, focusing on footwork taught by Barristan. Loose grip, pivot, breathe. A shout behind, crewman swinging boarding axe at his back. Before Viserys could react, Viserys swept low, tail whipping the deck, sending the attacker over rail. The dragon's landing smashed Scorpion turret into splinters. Seeing beast inches away, Lan faltered, something primal shrieking behind his eyes. Viserys feinted high, slashed low, hamstringing the admiral. Lan sagged to knees, sword clattering. Flames reflected in his eyes. The ship's aft castle ablaze. Viserys raised Exifaran but paused. "This fleet sails no more," he said. "Yield now, and I spare you." Lan spat blood mixed with bile. "A Lannister yields to none. Burn us or drown." Viserys gave slight nod. He stepped back. Viserys blinked once, then exhaled a plume that engulfed quarterdeck from rail to rail. Lan vanished in caldera of light. Crew abandoned. The flagship groaned, timber joints popping. Viserys signaled withdrawal. Unsullied extricated, dragons herded surviving enemy sailors into clustered lifeboats, then towed them by rope to an uncharted spit of sand. Before dawn, they left them water and biscuit. Let them row home with tails. When sun climbed, the sea smoked where charcoal hulls smoldered. Daenerys anchored in lee of an islet. Viserys sat on the gunwale, salt spray spattering blood-flecked greaves. He felt exhaustion seep bone deep, yet also quiet triumph. No dragon wounded, no ship lost. Viserys' courier dove pinned to masthead bearing message. Enemy fleet destroyed, Meereen stands inviolate. As sailors scrubbed decks of soot, Barristan approached. "The fires you order, your grace. Were you ever afraid they might consume you?" Viserys smiled wearily. "Every night. But if I flinch at that fear, the world will burn anyway, just without guidance." 3 days they patrolled, gathering flotsam that might betray secrets to future foes. On fourth dawn, a gull alighted on the prow, bearing a scarlet ribbon about its neck. Etched slip of parchment. "The Iron Bank of Bravos seeks discourse. Will dispatch envoy to Meereen. Terms favorable." Viserys snorted. Coin flew swiftly toward warm fires. They returned to Meereen facing unseasonable heat. The spring of Seir. Locals called years when desert winds blew early. Fields drooped. Water rations tightened. Viserys convened council for drought relief. Build new canals. Dig deeper wells. Import grain from summer wet Neath. Nysara proposed diverting a tributary. Rhaego worried about border skirmishes if water stolen. Viserys suggested treaty with nomad tribes for rites of passage, sweetened with forged steel plowshares. Negotiation replaced conflagration, yet risk remained constant as any flame. One evening, as canal engineers presented plans within the hall, Tenebric's roar shattered windows. Viserys sprinted to terrace. Above, dragons spiraled, agitated. He followed their gaze westward and saw it. The sky lit by distant green glow. Wildfire bright on horizon. Astapor burned. Rhaego cursed. Viserys' lips thinned. Barristan's hand moved to sword hilt in reflex. "Who marches?" Viserys asked. "Reports uncertain," Mysara answered. "Could be remnants of Yunkai allied with Free Company of the Dragon, or Sellswords financed from Westeros, hoping to choke your supply line. Either way, a challenge." Viserys exhaled slowly, feeling through Bond the dragon's eagerness and worry. Flames could not be allowed to spread, nor could he spare endless campaigns. He summoned council anew at midnight and issued a decree. Not war, but wall. Establish a chain of beacon forts along road to Astapor, each furnished with aviaries for Raven dispatch, each garrisoned by local militias trained by unsullied sergeants. If Astapor fell, beacon fires would alert Meereen in hours. He would march only if necessary. Else, dragons would strike supply wagons, break sieges from above. He drafted letter to Astapor's new council. "Hold strong, relief en route." He ended with line, In Dragon's shadow, humanity finds dusk, yet dawn both. He wondered if Daenerys might have phrased it kinder. At dawn, Viserys descended to the Dragon Forge, a cavernous chamber carved under the pyramid, where masons shaped stone for fort pylons. There he met Asha Pike, observing artisans chip. Bessel. She turned. You build walls now? Walls that breathe, he said. Light and voice travel through them, not fear. She nodded. My tall men ride patrol. They know desert's secret wells. Lend them banners. They will guard your beacons. He agreed, clasping arms. Old enemies reforged as bulwark, perhaps the greater victory than any battle. Weeks passed in symphony of hammers and hoofbeats. Beacon towers rose. Trade from Anneath arrived, barges laden with rice, their captains dazzled by dragons swooping low as escort. The Iron Bank envoy arrived, a thin man robed in grays and blacks, who spoke little but carried books heavy with debt records. He offered loans at iron interest to expand fleet, citing stability and promising leadership. Viserys negotiated half the offered credit, pledging Dragonguard trust bonds as security. Let Bravos feel invested in his rise. Let them root for his success. Midsummer saw Pale Mare finally stamped out, thanks to new cistern systems and free apothecary houses. Viserys visited the last clinic to close, where children once lay fever-rigid. Now they dashed about, chasing wooden dragon toys, carved from orchard driftwood. One boy tugged his cloak, asking whether dragons ate nightmares. Viserys knelt, looked him in hazel eyes. Dragons eat only what you feed them, he said. Starve nightmares with courage, and dragons will guard your dreams. Night that followed brimmed with thunder. Not storm, but wings. Viso 4 and Aurorix made it high above desert skies, flight turning to spiral of fire and smoke. Tenebrix watched from parapet with Viserys, both silent. May their brood know a gentler world, Viserys murmured. From that union, eggs appeared. 3 vast speckled orbs laid in a windswept niche at the pyramid's peak. Viserys dared not attempt hatching rituals yet, world still fragile. He had scribes inscribe the nest's perimeter with Valyrian runes for warding, placed unsullied at stairfoot, and decreed festival of renewal. Day of songs, no work, lanterns floating on canal waters, each bearing prayers of hope whispered by citizen. Candles bobbed, merging into constellations of flicker floating seaward. As festival ended, news arrived. Astapor held, attackers repelled by volley of dragonflame delivered from sky, while unsullied garrison joined malicious. Casualties low, morale high. Rhaego returned with spoils. Sieg, Scorpion, wreckage captured banners bearing Black Dragon device of Free Company, ironically fighting against the Dragon's Lord. Viserys ordered banners hanging upside down in city gates as lesson. Traitors to symbol fall by symbol. Late autumn found Viserys alone again atop Dragonfire's tower, studying restless stars. Winter would soon creep along sea lanes. Then, perhaps, Westeros beckoned with snow and ancient ghosts. He traced the horizon where Red Comet Scar had vanished months before, leaving sky healed but memory unscarred. Footsteps. Barristan approached, holding new Raven message. From Dorne, the Martels. They offered safe harbor and alliance, citing shared grievance against Lannisters. They pledged ships, spearmen, and cunning should the dragon cross. Viserys felt pulse quicken. Another piece of board shifted. He thanked Old Night, dismissed him to sleep. He remained until pre-dawn, watching East blush. Beside him, Tenebrix inhaled morning's first light, scales shimmering silver. Viserys placed palm to warm hide. 5 years, they said. He murmured, recalling that first night inside Meereen's burning shell, the vision of horizon widening. 5 years of conquest, healing, forging. Nearly 2 spent already. Time sped like hawk on thermals. Soon Westeros. He pictured Dragonstone's basalt towers, cold waves lashing, wind keening through empty halls. He pictured Blackwater Bay, where once wildfire consumed fleet. He pictured Red Keep's shadow, throne of twisted swords glinting behind lion banners. He felt no trembling. "What say you, old friend?" he whispered. Tenebric's answer came not in words, but in pure sensation. A surge of dry, hot wind across open steppe, scent of distant prey, thrill of wings catching first updraft. Forward. Bashi. Upward. Dot. Fireward. Viserys straightened. The dawn line spilled gold across city stones. In its glow, pyramids looked like blades of giants half unsheathed from earth's scabbard. Somewhere below, children laughed. Merchants bartered, freedmen tilled wet lines between melon rows, mundane miracles of peace. He turned from the railing, cloak swirling. Steps echoed down spiral stair. Plans awaited. Ship manifests, Dorne envoys, training schedules, egg warding spells, new grain tariffs. One by one, tasks would stack into ramp toward destiny. He felt the weight. He accepted. A dragon's wings were wide enough. In courtyard he met Misara, scribe board in crook of arm. She opened mouth to ask about dawn vigil, but instead caught his gaze and smiled as though hearing answer unspoken. "Let's begin," he said. Behind him, dragons launched into morning, 3 shadows crossing sun. Their roars rolled over Meereen like temple bells. People looked up and cheered, not in fear but in hope. And Viserys Targaryen, once beggar, now builder, felt the chorus fill his lungs until breath and voice and flame became one.